Okay. Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. I'm super excited. Vanessa Roanhorse is here. She's with Roanhorse Consulting, and she'll tell you all more about that. But I just wanted to say that Vanessa's been a really important partner to us here at UNM Rainforest Innovations for a long time. She started off as a mentor with our University Center program for UNM Gallup, and then she introduced us to one of our current tribal liaisons, Maitega Lee, who has been on multiple episodes on the podcast. So I'm really excited to have Vanessa here with us to share her story. So if you could just introduce yourself, Vanessa, and then we'll just get into the conversation.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Cecilia. It's been like a good circular journey with like the work, but also the relationship with you and UNM and the work that UNM has done. So hi, I'm Vanessa Roanhorse. I'm Diné Navajo from the Navajo Nation. Grew up on the nation and currently live here on Tibo lands with my partner and our 10-year-old. I am Twahanan Inchland, Twajitni Bashchin, Tabahan Dashiche, and Tachitni Dashinala. If you're Navajo, hi out there, and you'll probably hear all my clans are water based. They're water moving from point A to point B, or they're bitter, or they're red. And it's been a metaphor in my life that I think is really apt. So yeah, all my clans are water based.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Just to kind of mention, Vanessa was talking about the circular journey. She's actually in the Lobo Rainforest building now. Roanhorse Consulting has a presence here, which we're super excited about. And we can talk more about that later. But definitely a lot of like full circle moments with you, I think, especially within this past year. Um, but just to get the conversation started, I'm wondering if you can kind of take us back to what even led you to starting Roanhorse Consulting in the first place, because it's been a long journey, and I'd really love for you to share it with us.
Absolutely. Well, I started Roanhorse back in January of 2016. My partner and I had moved from Chicago summer of July 2015. And I had been in Chicago for 15 years, working part of that time for a sustainable non-for-profit, which another full circle moment is I started an administrative assistant there, left as a senior program manager, and this year became board chair of the nonprofit organization. So lots of circular beginnings and closing. And when we moved here, and most folks who are in this space know this because I share it freely, because I think it's incredible. It's important that we are talking more diversely about what it means to kind of be on various career trajectories. I don't have a college degree. I dropped out of college and have pursued a new number of jobs and opportunities. And in Chicago is where I worked for my first non-for-profit. And so we did sustainability work. I got to help build out the city of Chicago's weatherization program. I worked to build a minority and women contractor green workforce development initiative, did gamification programs with an organization called IDEO to reduce greenhouse gas, and just really had the freedom to try new things. However, when I moved to New Mexico, if you look at my resume, it's pretty all over the place. And it was really difficult to find a job, particularly with what I had been doing in Chicago for the Great Lakes region, but also how to translate and articulate it to what was happening here in New Mexico. So I looked for a job for 6 months and was not successful in finding anything. But thankfully, through relationships and networks, I reached out and was able to get my first contract with the city of Albuquerque to build out their small business resource collaborative strategy for the transportation project around Central Avenue. And I was hired because they wanted me to build a program to support small businesses who will be impacted by the fact that a huge artery in our community of transportation was being shut down. And if you know anything about transportation projects, when these things happen, it's the mom and pop shops that usually can't survive. They can't get past the loss of that walk-in traffic, the loss of access for people to park in front and get what they need from their businesses. So the goal was to create an initiative that could help those businesses stay open during construction. But alongside that, I needed to work to develop a flexible lending product. And so my first contract was with the city of Albuquerque, building out this initiative, which really kind of grounded me not only in what was happening in the city of Albuquerque, but New Mexico, but also was the reason I had to start an LLC. So one of the things I joke about is Roanhorse Consulting LLC is not the most inspired name for a business, but that's also because I wasn't anticipating it would be more than just for this contract. I've shared in the past that my journey has been, in the beginning, very much a reluctant entrepreneur. I never thought entrepreneur was going to be a part of my life. I didn't think it was possible. And it didn't occur to me that so many people at the time in my family were entrepreneurial. I just saw them as folks who knew how to make ends meet, to make sure we had food on the table, that we could take small vacations. But this idea of entrepreneurship in my family and my community wasn't language that we use so freely as we definitely do more today. But also for me, starting the company wasn't because I wanted to be as an entrepreneur. It wasn't because I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I was doing what many of us do, which I was trying to just close my financial ends so I could feed my family, get us off of our credit cards, and do something that brought me mission and purpose. And Roanhorse Consulting, 8.5 years later, I'm constantly blown away what we have built.
You guys have really become like a household name for Indigenous entrepreneurship and just like this whole other movement, you know? And so I think that's really cool that um you kind of started the business and got the LLC just out of necessity, and then now it's turned into like such a beautiful thing. It's almost like you didn't choose entrepreneurship, it chose you. It's like this is what you're gonna do.
I actually think that's more common than we talk about. Like when I speak to a lot of folks, I just don't think we grew up being like, entrepreneurship is going to be the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to walk out and I'm going to launch a company and we're going to become global. Like that way of thinking just never crossed most of our minds. I also think that like in some ways, maybe why we've had that ability to like help build this culture of entrepreneurship for Indigenous people is because we're able to articulate it from a place of like lived experience, as well as honesty about the fact that we don't get to see each other enough in these spaces and in these conversations. And so if there's one thing I'm really proud of what we've done at Roanhorse Consulting is we've used our relationships and our platform to really create a broader conversation nationally about what it means to be an entrepreneur, but in particularly why Indigenous entrepreneurship is so different and unique. And the last part is why Indigenous worldviews matter when we're thinking about the way people are motivated towards versions of success, but also why I think Indigenous entrepreneurs are primed to really be the future, like business holders and builders that are going to be thoughtful to weigh scale, growth, humans, all living beings in the earth that we live on. And so I think my hope is that there's a future state in which Indigenous people are overseeing the majority of capital so that we can help ensure that capital does the things it needs to do.
I think you bring up a really good point. Because I've been working in this space for about 7 years now. So I started around the same time, a little after you started your business. And I've noticed like a shift. I think one of the things, and this was during COVID, I remember you and a few other individuals were on one of our virtual seminars that we were having, and you guys were talking about like traditional um, Native American knowledge, like using it in entrepreneurship going forward. And that was one of the first conversations that I've ever felt like was held in like this type of entrepreneur innovation ecosystem space, at least since I have been working here. And now I feel like it's just everywhere. I really do see native ways of being and native entrepreneurs as leaders in like this whole new movement regarding how business should be done and could be done. Um, how have you kind of navigated, starting your business in a space where maybe some of those ways of thought that's not the norm, and now how have you navigated that and then come on up to where it's starting to be talked about more?
Yeah, I am, you know, I can honestly say when I um, started this work, particularly with Roanhorse Consulting and the city of Albuquerque, um, we weren't talking about entrepreneurship and economics from a place of like acknowledging the reality of like the systemic issues that are in play that have ensured that folks like me wouldn't have the same access to opportunities and resources. And the language we were using was traditional economic development language, and often the avatar of who the entrepreneurs were, people's avatars were unfortunately like the Silicon Valley. Like when people thought of the word entrepreneur, they were seeing the Silicon Valley avatar. So this was like what, 2016, and it's incredible to see the shift that's happened. But the navigation of it is that really, um, I had to be unapologetic about the words I was using and unapologetic about the circles that I was in, and to be consistent. And for me, the navigation has been let the work speak for itself, but also, um, you know, Shirley Chisholm, like I brought my own chairs to tables I wasn't invited, and I sat down and I didn't leave. And I think for me, that was scary and hard. And oftentimes, um, I felt like it was a conversation in which I spent more of my time educating than actually demonstrating what was possible. But the reality of this, there's so many people that were doing this. And so like the way I really got through it was by reaching out and finding other Indigenous people who were building businesses, who had done it successfully, who were at startup, who had come from a family of creators and makers and doers. And it was the weaving together of a network of Indigenous people building this that I think not only grounded me in that I was on the right path, but most importantly, reaffirmed that the things I was feeling and experiencing, they were too, but also the joy of of building something for yourself and using culture and ancestry and our way of being as like tools and true sort of secret superpowers that we had. Um, there's nothing like sitting around a table with Indigenous women entrepreneurs, and drinking coffee and laughing that can't solve anything for me. And so how I've gotten through this is by finding others who are doing what I'm doing and really just leaning into that wisdom. And so, however, whatever happens going forward, the thing I know is that we as Indigenous founders and entrepreneurs, I think we have made an indelible mark and place for ourselves. But it's also based upon what we want, and we center our lived experiences and culture. And no matter what happens, like I think we have like anchored to be resilient into whatever like storms we have in front of us. And so at this point for me, I just feel like we're just building more abundantly, more glitteringly, more brightly together. So I don't know, that was very long-winded. It's just, there's so much there, like so much there. Like, how do we get through this? And what did I do? And I think I do what everybody does is, you know, like send the signal out, like, hey, I'm here. Who else is here? And I guess just leaning into lots of humor and joy.
I think that you touch on like a very important point about community and building that community of Indigenous entrepreneurs who just can support each other and help each other navigate because through some of the discovery we've been doing with our program, that's like a big need that people have expressed, as well as a barrier, is they don't feel like they have that community. And I think it's because that community, at least with the term like Indigenous entrepreneurship, um, it's kind of a new community that's growing. It's not new in the sense that Indigenous entrepreneurs have always existed. It's just we're coming into spaces now, and making your presence known. So I think I'm really glad you talked about like community and how important it is for entrepreneurs because I know it can be lonely sometimes and feel lonely, but the truth is like you're not alone. There's a lot of other people doing the same thing and who are there to support you and like you said, just sit around drinking coffee and laughing. And I've heard the term like laughter is medicine. So I love that. Another question that I wanted to ask you about is, so you kind of started off just, like saying, okay, I need an LLC, and it was for that one project. Well, what are some things that Roanhorse Consulting has done since that first project in 2016, and how have you like built up to what you're doing now, and where do you see yourself going?
Definitely. So we started off with this big Albuquerque rapid transit project. And mind you, I was not an entrepreneurial expert. I didn't know what programs were out there for entrepreneurs. It was definitely an Indigenous way of learning, which is learn by doing, or what I used to say, baptism by fire. And like figured out very quickly what these things were. But through that work and then this like flexible lending product, it just really allowed me an opportunity and purview to really recognize the way we offer support, the way capital moves, and who gets to decide. And that really has been a foundation for our growth at Roanhorse Consulting, is that we have found ourselves consistently working at the intersections of capital flow, equity towards resources, and ecosystem building, because you need folks like us who work in the interstitial space, which is the place between the things. They're hard to know what they're doing because we're constantly connecting, organizing, as well as on the back end, working with institutional frameworks to see if we can tweak and adjust them to design and support something that has yet to be properly supported. So coming out of that work with the Small Business Resource Collaborative, we created something called the Navigator program, which really was like a different way of thinking about supporting entrepreneurs. And what it was like, let's get out of these institutions where we require everyone to walk through our doors. The only people who are able to often take advantage of those are folks who aren't afraid of those institutions because there hasn't been traditional harm or generational trauma from them. Two are people who have the resources to take time off during the working day to go into those places. And then three, oftentimes they would walk into these organizations and the resource was not custom enough to fit the problem they were experiencing. And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a lot of free time. And so we decided to put all of the resources into what we called our backpack. And we drove up and down. But the idea was to fundamentally flip the way we support entrepreneurs. So one, it has to be custom and high touch. Two, you actually have to build relationship to really uncover what's going on. And three, technical assistance doesn't matter if it doesn't get bundled with capital. At the end of the day, we're talking about systemic ways in which entrepreneurs are able to get the kind of emergency dollars they need or increase their cash flow to grow. And we know right now in the market, there isn't enough diversity of capital out there. So from those learnings, we have launched a number of character-based lending programs with our partner at New Standard Credit Union, which has grown significantly enough that it's now become the microloan program. And we have supported over 300 founders across the state of New Mexico, have moved close to $3 million, have less than a 2%. What is it, 2% when they don't
Is
pay
it
back?
like default
Default,
or
2%
yeah?
default, oh my goodness. Don't listen to this new sentence. I swear I know what I'm talking about. A 2% default. And our portfolio looks like nobody else's. It's 95% self-identifying folks of color. We have over, I think about 60-ish plus percent of women of color. A little over 50% are Native and Indigenous. And I believe around 40% are immigrant folks. And if you look at that group, these are the folks who would never be able to activate capital for their small businesses. And I'm incredibly proud of what Nusenda as an organization has done. But we've taken that as well and worked with other partners, and other Native-led organizations have utilized this program to launch their own funds. Because what we're offering not only is capital to founders at a equitable and patient rate, but we're also doing it with partners who know what they're doing and understand their lived experiences. The deeper systemic opportunity here is giving those partners a 2 to 3 to 4 year runway to decide, maybe I can be a capital provider and intermediary, because we need more capital movers in the industry. And so to me, it's a multi-layered systems approach. We're helping the founders. We're connecting an ecosystem. We're developing new lending products that demonstrate these folks are totally investable. And three, we're working with institutions like this credit union to help leverage and build infrastructure for other organizations to come into the market. We're building something out as well with RCAC, which is Rural Community Assistance Corporation. And we're taking that model, we're going from microfinance to bigger, larger dollars. And this program is pretty significant because one of our biggest issues is we don't just need 10,000. Founders need a minimum of 40,000 to start up. After you've started up and you're established, you need at least 100 to $500,000 to grow. I know that because my business needs it too. And so we have been in this space actively pushing hybrid and alternative capital lending products. And we have the partners and the network that's demonstrating it. And we're doing this at a national level. We sit on multiple think tanks working through these concepts. And then on the other side, we also have brought in a research and evaluation arm that uses Indigenous methodologies. And we've done this because we can build all of these things. We can create all of these opportunities. But if we're not actively using our way of evaluating and researching to understand what is real impact and how do we help people rethink the purpose of data and impact, then we're not only telling 1/4 of the story. And so our team is working with national foundations, think tanks, nations themselves, small nonprofits, And we're helping to just sort of say, how do we reimagine a way to build, but also measure these things differently? We have so many projects, but the three I'm going to highlight is that we have a continuation of something called the Rematriating Economies Apprenticeship, which is working to grow Indigenous women into the investment sector. Applications are open, so please go to rematriatingeconomies.com and apply as soon as you can. And then next to that, we have Center Native, which is our ecosystem platform, which came out of the pandemic. Center Native is a online virtual SaaS tool built by our partners at EcoMap. And the goal is to have a one-stop shop where Native-led organizations, leaders, consultants, organizations can find each other. It also works to demystify for funders, investors, and folks who have not worked traditionally in Indian country to identify partnerships quicker. So that's at centernative.com. And our third, which is yet to be fully launched, is going to be our Moonsoon Fund, which will be a investment arm that Roanhorse Consulting is excited to lead.
That's so exciting. I will link all of those in the description so that people can just click and find it. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, just because you're talking, about how you guys are really reimagining what it means, like to access capital, and what it means to be an entrepreneur and build a business in general. I was actually talking with Akila Martinez, yesterday, and she mentioned instead of the 5 C's of credit, you guys have totally like reinvented that. I'm wondering if you can share that with us.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I forgot to mention is part of seeing how hard it was to find one another. Myself and seven other women came together and we co-founded Native Women Lead. And Native Women Lead was really developed as a place for Indigenous women entrepreneurs to come together, to have shared lived experience, shared resources and opportunities. From the time we launched in 2017 to where it is today, again, bringing back that realization that you can provide as much technical assistance and networking opportunities, but if we're not also bringing alongside the capital and the investment tools, we're only providing part of the solution that's really needed. And so in that development, Roanhorse Consulting actually was incubating NWL until they rolled out to become their own 501c3. And while we were doing that, myself and Jamie Gloshay, co-founder of NWL, she's now the managing director at Common Future, we went on this journey of really asking ourselves, how can we think differently about the way we underwrite, and who gets to decide what is considered a reasonable risk mitigation strategy for who gets money. And we both knew immediately, because of the work with Co-op Capital and the New Senda Credit Union, that using the 5 C's of credit, which, by the way, for many people don't know, this is not a regulation requirement for banks to use. It is just a best practice. So the fact that everyone uses it is really interesting, because if you look at the 5 C's of credit, there's tons of studies to talk about how it has so much bias built into it, and even how credit scores are structured. The whole thing needs to be rewritten. So we decided, let's just try something else. So we came up with the 5 R's of rematriation, because we were really interested in centering Indigenous women, because they're 2/3 the breadwinners in our family, and our launching business is 2 times faster than our Native women, than our Native counterparts of white women. And all of that to say is that our 5 R's were how we actually underwrote some of the initial investments that we did within Native Women Lead, with the programs, all of their matriarch funds that we were able to build there. I'm trying to find the R's, because we actually did work hard to look at the R's to make sure that they were in alignment with the C's. So the 5 R's are relational, rooted, restorative, regenerative, and revolutionary. And the revolutionary part, I would say, in my mind, has a lot to do with the way we think about growth and opportunity, and Rooted really tried to address this concept of collateral.
That's awesome. Um, I love, that you took something that existed and then but wasn't working for you and like made it your own that you knew would work for the people that you're working with. Um, I'm wondering if like now where you're at and what you've experienced and just everything that you've observed throughout this journey, what are some key needs and barriers that still exist that you would like to see um, changes surrounding?
Yeah, well, I mean, the capital piece is still a big one. I'm just going to be completely honest that the lack of flexible and affordable capital for our founders, I mean, for probably all founders, but particularly for Native people, is significant. Uh, and so part of that is we need, in my mind, I think we need more partners and institutions that have been able to build billion-dollar assets under managements for their organizations to help provide runway and underwrite other organizations to be creative and create new lending and investment products. We don't have enough tools that can meet these people where they are, and we also don't get um, enough money to create something that really understands that lived experience. If there's anything that was really clear to me during COVID is the issues Indigenous people face are both infrastructure, human rights based, and then the sort of continuation of financial and historical trauma from the way the land has been divvied out, the way we have been forced to have to be recognized as federal or non-federal or state recognized tribes. And that impact continues to ensure that we're not able to have the money to provide the kind of capital people need. I think another thing is we have to demystify what these tools are. Like, what are these mechanisms of capital flow? People talk about all the time. I was on a call recently with someone very smart who's worked on the Northwest area for a very long time. And he was like, the big words these years is capital stack. But if we're not able to articulate how the capital stack is put together, where the capital comes from, and how do you know that capital is the right capital flow, it's just a bunch of words. And I think the financial system has done a really good job at making financing seem very complicated. There's so much education that needs to be done, but also an acknowledgement that like the folks who have made those decisions continue to keep us out and not allow us to build deep institutional generational wisdom and knowledge where we live and where we're from. So more education and more people building funds and new types of organizations that can move money. We need institutions that have had 50 to 100 years to become trillion-dollar assets under management organizations to underwrite those groups to have that time to build it. We need very clear and thoughtful education pathways into finance so that we have more people sitting on the other side of the table from us who understand what we're going through and can advocate, because we're not just a small percentage anymore. And that's partially why we have our fund that we've been building and our Rematriating Economies apprenticeship, is because we need to be building bespoke funds, but we also need our people in these firms who can actually advocate, educate, and move that money to us. Because during the pandemic, I had over 30 different emerging fund managers and fund managers reach out to me and say, hey, we have a BIPOC fund, but I can't find the I. We shouldn't be having that problem in 10 years from now. The third and final thing I think entrepreneurs and founders ultimately need, we don't need one-on-one classes. They need deep, high-touch consulting to help them leapfrog the problem that's in front of them. Because too often the problem that sits in front of us will stop us from moving forward. And I know it's possible. We recently did a hackathon where we surrounded women, and it's not perfect. We're figuring it out. But the idea was like, what would it look like if we could surround an entrepreneur with consultants who are working at the highest level in their field to help them understand what is the thing I really need to focus on. So I continue to push at that level. I continue to believe that if we can, I say infiltrate, but really like dream from within these new concepts and ideas, I do think Indigenous founders and entrepreneurs will get the work that they need, because none of them need help with what their vision is. They're the experts at what they're building and selling. What they need help with is all the other stuff. And so I just want to unlock, get rid of the barrier, and then get out of the way. But the only way to do that is to make sure that we give them all the tools in that backpack and they're ready to go.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And I feel like I'm gonna ask this question, but I feel like you're already creating solutions. But are there any other like ways that we can, if we identify those needs and barriers, what are ways that like we can move forward like with solutions to help address those current issues for Indigenous entrepreneurs?
Um, I think I think there's probably many ways, but I feel like one of the things I'm seeing across the sector around entrepreneurship is that however we frame this work, we can't frame it from a place of DEI. Like, this is an economic imperative. This isn't just the right thing to do, although it is. But that, like, at the end of the day, if we're serious about having a strong American economy, then they need Indigenous people to be successful. And I really feel like language matters, commitment matters, and I don't need the folks with the money to pigeonhole us anymore. And I definitely don't need the folks with money to get scared about investing in this. I'm looking, I think, as a solution is like, how can we be brave as a collective? How can we be bold about what we need? And then how can we as Indigenous people be unapologetic about who we are as the people from this land, and that we inherently, fundamentally have solutions that can help everybody else. And I really think this is a narrative conversation that has to happen. And so I would welcome and encourage anyone to reach out to me to talk about this, because it's about shifting the story of who Indigenous people are and what is our purpose and our place in today, but really into the future. Because as many people have shared in the past, Indigenous people pull from the past to build in the present, because we can dream the future all at the same time. So solutions are, put your money into Indigenous people.
Yeah, I just got chills when you were saying that last part about pulling from the past and into the future. Yeah, I think just sharing such the deep wisdom that Indigenous people have, not just regarding entrepreneurship, but like the worldview in general. That is the root and where the solution is, because it's definitely a different way of seeing things. And I just want to thank you for your time, because I know you're really busy, but you really are a trailblazer in this space, as is many of the people that I speak with. And I'm just always so inspired by the work that you're doing. And I've seen the fruits of your labor, and I look forward to seeing more fruits to come, because I feel like you're just getting started. We're just getting started, with this whole movement. But thank you so much for like being a leader of this effort. And before we get off, I just wanted to ask if you have any final thoughts or things you'd like to share with people listening, whether they're just about to start a business or just thinking about it, or maybe they've started but they don't know where to go. What are some final like words of wisdom that you have for them?
Well, I think what's important is find an entrepreneur in your community and go have a cup of coffee with them. Hang out, spend some time, come to the Rainforest building, have a cup of coffee at the Rainforest. Send a note to any of the tribal entrepreneurship liaisons that are out there and meet with them. Get on the listservs, sign up for every single listserv you can possibly find, and don't be afraid to ask. There is not a single question you're going to ask that none of us haven't asked ourselves already, that we haven't had to find out on our own. And reach out to Cecilia, because Cecilia can help you figure out where to start, what's in your journey, and what could you activate today. Just don't be humble about it. Just do it.
Be within, like, take that power that you have within you and just, um, make it happen. And like Vanessa said, reach out to me. I definitely don't have the capital for you, but I can point you to people who might. I can point you to people
Absolutely.
who might have the right training. That's kind of one of my roles. So, I like to connect people to the right people. So definitely feel free to reach out to me and don't hesitate to stop by and say hi because Vanessa's here at the Rainforest. I'm here. Nicole Johnny from Raven Indigenous Capital Partners is here. So there's a lot of people who understand where you're coming from and who want to see you succeed. So um, thank you so much, Vanessa. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. And I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. I feel like I could just ask you question after question after question because you have so much experience. But thank you for the time that you were able to share with us. And I definitely look forward to future conversations on here and over coffee.
Well, thanks, Cecilia. And when you invite, I'll always show up.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.